guys. So today I want to be talking about the CPRH module at SGU. Before we get into that, I want to kind of draw a little timeline going on here. Let's say you just finished MNI and you're going to be starting the CPRH, GOER, and the DNPR module. And then after term 5, you're going to be studying for CBSC and then step 1. So I would say at this point, once you're done MNI, it's a pivotal point in your medical journey. Why? Because you're going to be entering the final spiral of modules, and you're going to have to keep in mind that at this point here, this is when your dedicated studying officially starts, not at this point. The reason why is because these exams here, they do a great job in testing your comprehensive ability, your ability to take in lots of information and to get tested on a lot of different systems, not just one system anymore. There's a whole variety of systems that you're going to get tested on, and everything becomes cumulative afterwards. And that's important because right after you're done these modules, you're going to be entering your CBSC studying phase and then your step 1 studying phase. And at these points here, you have to be able to take in lots of information and be able to apply them in the form of questions and in the form of exams. And at this stage here is really important to work on that and to practice that until you're able to perfect it, and then you're ready. So once again, this point is really, really important, and I want you guys to take your studies extremely seriously now, and keep in mind that you're going to be studying for these exams now. Even though these exams are in the way, these are the ones that you're going to be focusing on, and your study habits starting at this point should be looking forward to this. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about CPRH strategies, and hopefully it can give you guys a guide and maybe like a day-to-day guide as to how to approach CPRH. Okay, so let's get started. So CPRH, you guys already know it's cardio, pulm, renal, and heme. Now, I want to talk about the timeline a little bit in the sense that you have 4 weeks, more or less, for CPRH. Now, the best way to divide this up is to do 1 week at a time for each specific sub-module. Okay, so that means let's break it down really, really simple, is that you have 1 week for cardio. Now, I want to focus on cardio, and then you can use the same fundamentals to apply to for the other 3 of this module. Okay, if you have 1 week of cardio, you have a really, time is of the essence, essentially. You only have 1 week to review everything and to feel prepared for not just the CPRH exam, but to clear as much cardio as you can in order to make it easier for when you get into your dedicated, that you don't have to review all the cardio once again. You can only focus on the stuff that you're weak on and focus more on questions. Now, I'm going to talk about questions a lot, but let's start here. Okay, so you have 1 week cardio, and you haven't touched cardio since, let's say, term 4, even term 1. That's when you did your cardio phys last. So I would say the most important thing to do is to use first aid as kind of like an encyclopedia as to what you need to know, because you should be able to know everything for the first aid section of cardio for your CBSC, and the same thing applies for the cardio portion of your CPRH exam. So I would say if you can spend 1 day going through first aid and annotating and getting an idea of what you need to know and what you need to focus more on, and kind of brushing up on those physio and the embryo topics that you've learned already, but you need to just solidify. Now, I want to show you guys a couple things. Right now, I'm on my Notability app, and if I go back here and let's say I go into my CPRH, obviously there's a lot of practice questions here because practice questions are key. But if I go down here to the bottom, notice how my CPRH lectures, I only downloaded the first and the second CPRH lecture, because after I realized that it's better to don't worry too much about the lecture slides, what's going on, and take initiative and become an independent learner. Focus more on making up your own schedule and seeing what works best for you rather than just going into lecture. So an important fundamental for this portion in your dedicated is to get ready for independent studying and to practice that. And in order to practice that, you kind of have to step away from slides, and obviously you're going to have IMCQ still, you're going to have small groups, and don't worry too much about that. IMCQ and small group, they're all practice at the end of the day. So even if you're not exactly up to date with the lectures, it's completely fine, because your mind should be looking forward, not just on these little exams that are coming up, but these big exams right here. Once again, you're in your dedicated period. So we're going to do first aid, we're going to do annotating. Now, if I go onto my first aid section here, let's see. I'm going to show you guys some stuff. So if I go through the cardio here, look here. So this is something, subclavian steal syndrome. That's something that SGU never taught us. So when I was going through my first aid and I noticed something that SGU never taught us, I really focused in on it because I know it's new content and I want to get a couple passes in my mind. Similarly here, let's see, this congenital heart defect. is Williams syndrome. I don't remember SGU ever teaching us Williams syndrome, so this is a good time to focus in on these things. A lot of these other things you've learned before, so it's good to review, but focus more on the new concepts. A lot of these stuff is review, but if I go here and splitting of S2, that's another really, really important thing that SGU, I don't remember SGU ever teaching us in term 1 to term 4, so this is something that I would focus in on more. And this is essentially what you should be doing when you're annotating, is to see exactly what you know and what you don't know, and then focusing on that. That should take 1 day. Now, the most important thing that SGU is going to be testing you on in CPRH, and same thing for CBSC and same thing for STEP, is pathology. And once again, you guys know that my pathology gold standard is pathoma. And for example, you would go through the cardio section for pathoma. That would take 1 day as well. Okay, this is how I would do it. Obviously, if you have a specific different technique that you think works best, you should definitely approach that, but use this kind of as a guide. So 1 day for first aid annotating, 1 day for pathology, and that would be your pathoma, and that's same thing, annotating and reviewing as well. Then the most important thing during this period is to get into questions. Guys, if there's one thing that you should take away from this video is that do not delay starting questions. Don't get stuck in content review and start questions as soon as you can. This applies for any sort of big exam. I remember during the MCAT time, they were always telling me to start questions early, don't worry about reviewing. And now the same thing happens here, is that for CBSC and STEP, the best way to see if you're prepared is by applying through questions. Why? Because CBSC and STEP and even an MCAT, all these big exams, they're going to ask you questions. So they want to see how you apply the content, not just if you're able to take notes well and annotate well, or perform in small group. Those things are not as important. It's just questions, because a pass and a fail, it depends on if you can answer questions. So with that in mind, it's really important to start questions early. Now, SU does a great job because they give you RX. And for RX, essentially when you create a question bank, there's 2 tabs at the top. There's one tab that you can use to find subject-specific questions. Then there's one that shows you first aid topics. And I want you guys to click on the first 8 topics, and you'll see that you can choose specific chapters. So I would obviously choose cardio chapter. After I've done my first 8 annotations and my pathoma, I would start the cardio chapter and start doing the questions. Your goal should be to 100% these questions by the time you take the exam. Obviously, there's a lot of questions, so the earlier that you start, the easier it'll be for you. And this should take around 2 to 3 days. Okay, so you have already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days of a solid cardio review plus questions. And then I would say 1 day should be spent on starting UWorld at least. UWorld has a lot of questions. And if you can spend 1 day doing, let's say, 80 questions and getting your foot in the door, making a nice, taking a big chunk out of the questions for yourself, it's honestly, it's great. And notice how I really haven't spent too much time talking about Anki, even though I think Anki is great, is that during this time, these questions should be taking over your Anki time. Why? Because doing the questions, it applies your knowledge, and then if you get a question wrong, the explanations, specifically on UWorld, they're really, really good. They give you a full breakdown of the question, why each question answer is true, and why all the other answer questions are wrong. And if you can go through that and really solidify your knowledge doing questions, it's going to pay dividends once you get to CBSC and STEP studying time. Okay, so for UWorld, I'm going to quickly open up my UWorld here. And I want to show you guys how I would make questions. This is on my iPad, so if you're doing it on your computer, the format might be a little bit different. But once you go onto here and you create a test using the question bank, obviously mine doesn't have any unused, but if you, when you do start yours, you're going to have all of your unused. You're going to go onto that unused section, then you're going to click next. Now you're going to get to a point where it talks about subjects. You can select all the subjects, and then once you get here to the systems portion, you can go on, once again, for the example here, is that you can go into the cardio system, or even subtype of cardio system. Let's say you just reviewed your congenital heart defects. You can choose congenital heart disease here, and then just get questions on that. And I think that's really good because you're going to be filtering through to see, filtering through the questions and choosing the things that you just reviewed through your first aid and through your pathology and through your pathoma, and then you can get questions on that to test your ability to answer them. So this would be kind of how I would structure my week in order to succeed on the CPRH exam and also to get prepared for CBSC and STEP, because once again, you are in your dedicated period right now. If anybody else tells you otherwise, don't worry, because once you get to this point here, and you only have 4 weeks for CBSE, you're going to wish that you really started buckling down and locking in closer to the beginning of your CPRH, GOER, and DNPR modules. Okay, so once again, just a quick summary: 1 day of first aid, 1 day of pathoma, and then you're going to go through your RX questions 2 to 3 days. Try to 100%. Don't worry about 100% in UWorld. And now, okay, this is the part that's really important. Is that, let's say you during CPR you weren't able to really focus on a specific subject and you have a really big content gap. Only when you have a really big content gap is when you should be using Boards and Beyond. Boards and Beyond, there's tons of cardio videos. If I wanted to go through all the cardio videos, and if that was my plan, it would take me honestly 3 to 4 days just to review those videos and annotate them. So that's why I don't want you spending too much time in the Boards and Beyond. Same thing for Sketchy. Sketchy has a lot of videos, for example, for cardio, for the drugs. But as far as I know, SGU does not, like for the CPRH module, they don't ask you too many drug questions. So you can focus a little bit less on Sketchy. Keep it in mind, obviously, I still think Sketchy is one of the gold standard resources, but use this more once you get to closer to your like actual CBSE exam in order to review. Why? Because I would love you guys to go through it during your CPRH module, but time is of the essence, and it's more important to be doing questions and using these high yield things like first aid and path for your exams. But Sketchy is great too if you do have time. But Boards and Beyond, Sketchy, and Anki as well. Anki, once again, it's a fantastic tool. Specifically Anking, I'm gonna say is the best tool to use. But once again, is that you shouldn't be doing too much cards. You should be doing cards if you get a question wrong. Maybe you can unlock that one and then keep it in the cycle. But don't worry too much about clearing your cards. I know during Term 4 and during M&I, you're doing around 500 plus cards a day. But doing 500 plus cards a day during this time when you should be doing questions and you should be going through your first aid and solidifying all those concepts, it's not necessarily worth it. So you should be doing maybe, I would say, 100 to 200 solid crisp cards during this time. So this is how I would structure my week. Once again, guys, the Boards and Beyond and the Sketchy and the Anking, those ones, don't worry about it too much. Focus on these high yields. And then once you're done everything for that cardio week, just move on to the next one. Don't get stuck in cardio for over 10 days. Why? Because you still have palm, you have renal, you have heme, and you only have 4 weeks until your exam. So keep this in mind. And if you guys have any questions, I think this is the best way. Even if I could go back, this is how I would approach it. I was able to score really high. I think I got 100% on this exam. And the reason why is because I had a set plan from the beginning, and I didn't get 100% because I was focused on this exam, is because I was looking towards these exams. And as a side effect, there's a 2 birds 1 stone effect, is that as an effect of focusing on this exam, I was able to succeed on this exam. So keep that in mind and follow this plan. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.